Louisiana versus all y'all. Jarrett Roser here today with Trenton Charles, former Scotlandville standout, been up at Yale the last couple years. Some football and some track. I mentioned on social media some record-setting track performances up at Yale. And Trenton, man, it's good to see you. I think as soon as we hopped on the video, we both had big smiles. How you been doing?
Yeah, man, it's good to see you too. It's a time we're living in right now, but I'm healthy. My family's okay. So I'm still being positive and still focusing on the good things.
Yeah, it's been a bizarre 2020 to say the least. Just, I mean, from much earlier in the process, a lot of ongoing health and political issues and so much going on around us. And then obviously the past 2 weeks, issues of police brutality and racism in this country coming back to the forefront in one of the more blatant ways that we've seen. And that's saying quite a bit because the list of incidences we see on a daily basis are so long. And so that's something that we've talked a lot about the last couple of weeks, and I know we want to talk a lot about today. But before kind of devoting most of our time to that, just kind of catching up some folks down here on how things have been going up at Yale. What's that experience been like, just going up to that prestigious of a university and kind of enjoying that experience and making a name for yourself too as a student athlete?
It was a culture shock, to say the least. Like coming from Scotlandville, coming from an all-Black environment, to go into that was like a huge culture shock, and I struggled at first just to be comfortable in my own skin in that place, just because like everything was so foreign to me. I am very grateful for the opportunity and the friends I've met, the people I've been able to be around. They've opened up my mind to a lot of new ideas. Because I like when you go out and see more people and meet people from across the world and across the country, Louisiana seems so small all of a sudden. Like what happens here seems so small all of a sudden. Like there's so many naive thoughts that I had prior to going to Yale that I'm thankful that I don't have anymore.
Yeah. So honestly, some of your experience is actually going to weave in pretty well with the bigger conversation too, because I think some of what you talked about in terms of just interacting with different people from different cultures is kind of one of the big issues that we keep running into when we try to have the type of discussions we've been trying to have the past couple of weeks. Is this country is 73% white, and so there's a lot of white people that feel like they have a very full picture living in wherever they live without ever interacting with someone from a different area of the country, from a different race, religion, whatever. And so you got to see kind of how different some perspectives can be just, by a quick move to go to a different school.
Right. Like a lot of my peers don't understand like the idea of like, most white people cannot imagine what it's like to fear the police, because that's not what they're intended to do. Like their name is to protect and serve. That's what they're supposed to do. But like for many people in the Black community, that's not our reality, and it never has been. And I understand that just because this isn't your reality does not mean this is not happening. And you don't have the right to say this isn't happening or to judge these people for how they grieve if you aren't going through these things.
How you mentioned some of the, I guess, the growing pains of some of of just like feeling the culture shock at Yale, and then kind of meeting so many different people and having some of those conversations. What was that like? What were some of those conversations like? What were certain aspects that you feel like you learned and grew? And you kind of hit on it some in terms of just kind of broadening perspectives, but also, what were either some of the biggest hurdles with communicating with other people and them recognizing those same things versus some of the points of growth for them where you actually saw people start to hopefully have some realizations on some things too of kind of where you come from.
And I had like a 4-hour conversation about religion. And like, I was always like, I knew of religion, like I had like a pretty confident knowledge of like what God was and like how I felt about those things. But other people feel completely opposite and completely foreign to the way I feel about God or the way I feel spiritually. And like, who am I, in a sense, to say who's right or wrong? Because like, if you're worshiping something for positive beliefs, we're all acting to not kill, not steal, not lie. Like, if your religion is preaching good beliefs, then who am I to judge and be angry that you're not following my religion? Even like, I met and interacted with many more people of the LGBT community, way more than I would have when I was home. And I'm ashamed for my ignorance while I was home. Ashamed for not understanding that like the exact same dreams, hopes, ideas, and thought process that we go through when we see people that we're attracted to, they see the exact same things. Like, their love is just as good and just as equal and just as strong and just as real as our love. And like, being able to see that up close and personal and have conversations with those people, I realized some Black people grow up in white communities and still don't get the benefits of white communities, despite what white people say. Despite people saying, oh, you had all the same benefits. But the effects of systemic racism go past from generations. Like, the consequences of enslaving a people for years and years and years is going to be passed on to their children and their children and their children. The mental trauma that is caused by systemic racism is going to be passed through to your children. Like, you can't, like, no amount of money, no amount of opportunity is going to change if we do not change the system in itself and change the thought process of so many people in their life. People have to change and break down their own biases, their own stereotypes. You have to challenge yourself.
It's always so interesting to me how quickly people brush aside this idea of slavery or the struggle for civil rights as though it was so long ago. And then you realize in some cases you're having conversations with older white people who were literally going through school when schools were still segregated, and they're acting like this is so long ago and so far in our past that it doesn't have any impact today. And you realize that there are still a lot of people that are having that conversation and trying to deflect from that literally saw it as kids. We're literally alive and somehow think that as soon as like a right to vote came, or as soon as the first student went to an all-white school, that all of a sudden everything was done, everybody's equal. And it's really interesting to realize how deeply rooted in division a lot of aspects of this country are, and a lot of the systems that we still see today date back to those times, and how quickly people try to dismiss that.
Yeah, that's probably, as a member of the Black community, it's one of the things that upsets us the most, probably, because like, and when you deny history, you're bound to repeat it. You're denying the pain of my ancestors. You're denying what happened when you say, oh, this isn't affecting you anymore. Like, you can't, like, imagine someone's enslaved for the first 30 years of their life, and then they're expected to raise children properly after that, after being told that they aren't human, after being literally told that you are not human. You're expected to come and raise children properly. All the trauma we deal with that's mentally damaging. They're like, oh, he was bullied. Oh, he was like, oh, we understand because he went through this, he went through that. But why every time a Black person makes a mistake, it's like, oh, it's their fault? When we've literally been designed, like, we've literally been, I don't want to say designed, but we've literally had the foot of the oppressor on our neck for 400 years.
I mean, you're young enough that some of the big moments prior to the one that we're in right now, you were at a pretty young age. I mean, looking at like when Obama got elected, you would have been 9 or 10. At the time of Ferguson, you would have certainly been old enough to be very aware of what's going on, kind of the tail end of high school or middle of high school. But just from the perspective of a very culturally aware and educated young man, like, what has been your perspective on what the last 2 weeks have been like in comparison to kind of what you'd seen in the past in terms of the reaction to what we saw, to what happened to George Floyd and what happened to Breonna Taylor and different people, to see kind of some of the reaction? Have you felt positive momentum or more encouragement than what we've seen, or what's kind of been your overall reaction?
Well, if we're being honest, I've been aware, very aware, since the death of Trayvon Martin in 2012 when I was 12 years old. I've been very aware since then, long ago. Like, and even before then, I knew what was going on. But I will admit, the progress we're making now, the consistent participation, the consistent movement, the protests, this is more progress than we've made in recent marches and in recent protests and in recent instances. I just hope that we don't take that progress as a reason to slack off like we always do. Once we get our goal, we stop. We have to keep pushing, keep pushing, keep pushing. Just because these cops are charged and these cops go to jail, every cop after them, every situation after this, the judicial system, the healthcare system, the legislative system, all of it needs to be reformed, and we cannot stop until it is.
Yeah, that's as soon as the officer who actually physically had his knee on George Floyd's neck, Derek Chauvin, was arrested and charged with third-degree murder. You saw some people say, okay, they arrested the guy, and try to brush that aside as though there weren't other officers standing by allowing it to happen, as if we don't live within systems that allow that to continue. To happen in the first place, and then to see a spotty at best response of justice, and more often frustrating than in any way feeling in that sense of justice. And so I that's kind of been my thought too, in terms of this is a much bigger and widespread issue, and it's been encouraging to see people respond, but I hope that we have the stamina for it that it's going to take, because there's a lot that I think has to change and be addressed over a variety of approaches and a long span of time.
If we can stay dedicated, it'll happen. We've done it before, like with the Montgomery bus boycott. That was 381 days of us boycotting buses, and like we know these things work. Like all this civil unrest, like all this protesting of injustices has been working. These things are working, but like people have also got to realize that like voting is not the only answer. Pacifists who are saying go out and vote are slowing down the movement, because there's no point in voting if the system itself is designed to fail you. Like there's no point in voting for a system that isn't designed to protect you, because if you're just hiring police chief after police chief who isn't going to protect you no matter what they say they do, if the people who are enforcing the laws are not following them, then it doesn't matter. Like we have to, like the system and the people itself have to be changed. Like we have to change the hearts and the minds of the people itself.
This may seem like a ridiculous time to mention a Rage Against the Machine lyric, but I consistently think back to, and I don't even remember which song, but the line, the structure is set, you'll never change it with a ballot poll. And I think voting's a really important piece, but I think it's just one piece of a much bigger puzzle that the protests are also a piece of. Something as simple as just communication with people from different backgrounds, perspectives, skin colors, creeds, all of those things. I think that's a huge piece in terms of just bringing people together across some of those lines. It's just there's so many angles to it, and I think one of the things right now that's been a reason why, or one of the reasons why I try to stay as loud about it as I do, is because I'm aware that white people are the vast majority of the country in terms of numbers. And so there are a lot of white people who either genuinely have not encountered people differently from them based on whatever their background is, or have been willfully ignorant. And I think what's going on right now, we're at such a big moment in these pushes for progress that it's an opportunity to kind of take away that excuse of ignorance and really kind of draw the lines that this is obvious, and if you don't see it, you're trying not to see it, and you're a part of the problem.
Right, right. I agree. White silence is one of the biggest issues and biggest aids in holding up the system, because we can protest as much as we want, but we don't make a large enough population to do it on our own. We need the help of every single person we can get, and every single person who is not trying to help and dismantle a racist system is contributing to it. There is no other way around it. Either you're, and I also think ignorance, the excuse of ignorance has to stop. We live in the age of social media and the internet. Anything you want to know, you can type it into your phone and you can find. And you're telling people how you want the things we need. There's a list of books you want to read. If you wanted to research and do these things and help us out, then you can do them, and you don't need to be begging other people to tell you what to do, other people to lead you on the way. If this was something you wanted to do, then you'd be doing it.
What do you mentioned the Trayvon Martin murder in kind of the context of your life and being that age, young, not even a teenager yet, and just kind of the impact that had on you to see another young black man killed, and kind of the way that was handled from a justice system as well as a public response, and how split people were about that somehow. Would kind of take me back a little bit to your memories of you seeing or hearing about what happened, and what your emotions were like, and how you felt that, how you internalized that, how that became such a seminal moment for you in your kind of growth as a young black man.
Fear, outrage, confusion. Like at first it's hard to understand who's prosecuted, but other people are not seeing the same issues I'm seeing. As a 12-year-old boy was playing, people refused to believe that, refused to see what was plain and simple. And that's like when I realized I can say whatever I want, I can be as peaceful as I want, raise my hand and do whatever I want. If he decides he's going to shoot me that day, and there's nothing I can do, and there will still be people out there who would justify his actions, and that is nothing short of terrifying as a young black boy. And then to see Tamir Rice die as a 12-year-old boy, like you grow up being scared of the police all the time. Even when you're just sitting in traffic, you find yourself trying not to draw attention to yourself. Anytime you see a cop, you just try your hardest not to draw attention to yourself, though you're not doing anything. Stand up, live in fear of my peers, of my classmates and their parents. Like you grow up like really terrified to have the police called for any situation. Like I know like peers of mine who would like prank call the police. But to me, that was a terrifying thing to ever do. Because if they actually came and like saw little kid, like the black kids here, I feel like they just take the chance to take the opportunity to do whatever they wanted. Because, I called them, I shouldn't have called them, I was playing around. Like as a black man, you're guilty until proven innocent.
Now, I guess a little bit older, a decade older, as a young adult. How old are you now? 20, 21?
20.
20. How is your perspective similar in probably a lot of ways versus any kind of differences now as you watch the recent string of tragedies that we've seen? Has it been how similar of a reaction has it been to what you remember being younger and kind of seeing it in that specific of a way for some of the first times versus now as an older, farther into your worldview young man who has also seen these things continue now for this much of your life?
They it doesn't get easier to see. Like it just makes you angrier, it makes you more upset. And I understand how sometimes people give up. I understand how tiring and exhausting it can be to see this happening all the time. Because ever since I've been aware of it, I've seen it happen pretty much all the time. And like to be socially aware and to be aware of those things can be very exhausting. But I'm very thankful for like that. I'm very thankful for being socially aware because like my fellow Black Americans, just in the Black experience is also not the same. Some Black people do not grow up the same way as others. Some grow up around white privilege. Some people grow up and like don't experience all of the plights of Blackness and think they're exaggerated because they do not experience them all. I understand that some people will experience lives that like they have the privilege of not being able to experience racism. I understand that now as an adult, but it's angrier still because I also understand that as an adult, when I saw other issues, I dismantled them. When I saw I was thinking problematically, I dismantled those thought processes. When people told me that I was wrong for feeling a certain way, that this was wrong and inhumane, I dismantled those thought processes. And I'm nothing but a 20-year-old child. Like I was much younger than that when I did it. Like I started college at 18. Like I was breaking down and changing my mind and had the ability to do that. And it's still scary. It's still scary. Because you feel even more and more powerless the more videos come out. The more videos that come out and there's not a single answer that works. Because now when I have a child, there's nothing I can tell my son that protects him from the police. There's nothing that I can tell him that would guarantee his safety. How do you bring children into this world with that fear over your heart? How do you raise children and let them go play and you're just terrified that someone will bother them the color of their skin? And that's why like I have to change it. Like I have to be the change I want to see in the world because I myself refuse to live in fear for the rest of my life and to feel powerless for the rest of my life.
That's the idea of kind of the direction of society and how we leave things for next generations is something that I've thought a lot about through a lot of this. I talking to a friend last week who he and his wife are, I mean, very educated, multiple degrees. She's a multiple degrees each. She's a college professor. He's worked in higher ed, and they had kind of decided they didn't intend to have kids, that they were going to kind of go about, educating kids through their jobs and careers and everything. And I've joked with them for a long time about how they should have kids. They'd be great parents and stuff. And I brought it back up kind of half jokingly this time that they have enough perspective and care and whatnot that they're the type of people that should be having kids to help populate the next generation, as opposed to some folks that we see that continue to extend their own ignorance to a next generation. I think I have been encouraged to see more of those positive qualities with younger people over time, and I hope that whatever we can do, we can kind of continue some positive momentum and then hand the keys to kids that are growing up in a better frame of mind to continue to take it farther. But I think so much about, I don't want, when you're my age, for us to be having the same damn conversations, or when my nieces are your age or eventually my age, for us to be having the same conversations. It's so bizarre that we're still as far as we may be from 100 years ago, we're still so much shy of where we should be and where people try to act like we are at times. And watching the interactions within, I guess, generations upon generations is really kind of interesting to keep in mind during everything that we're talking about right now.
if there's one thing about the oldest, like the people and the older generation, they're very active in the community. They vote a lot, so a lot of their policies still affect us. And old people are stubborn, to say the least. We have a bunch of old, stubborn politicians stuck in their ways, running the country, and we just can't allow that to happen anymore. We can't keep having presidential candidates that are 70, 80 years old. Like, that makes no sense. Like, they're stuck in the ninth, like both Donald Trump and Joe Biden, in my opinion, are still stuck in a long time ago. I respect Joe Biden for changing his ways and the things he's done, but Joe Biden grew up in an era of tremendous, an era of tremendous racial, what was the word I want to say? There was a lot going on. I can't really get the words as a lot, but like, and during the civil rights era, like, Joe Biden wasn't always on this side. And a lot of people of that age group were not on this side back then. And those same people are still alive. Those people were teenagers back then. They're still alive, still in our government, still running things, still being mayors and governors and senators. Senators sit in office for 30, 40 years. Just judges sit in office for 30, 40 years. Like, we can't allow the same people to run our country forever. Things change, people change, and we have to adapt with things.
With some of the criticism of Trump, it was so frustrating to see Biden's comments a couple weeks ago and try to monolith the Black community and try to tell Black citizens across the country whether they qualify or not as Black, depending on who they vote for or not. When you look at, that one of those two men is going to be president this time next year. What was kind of your takeaway from seeing those comments from Biden, and then how you kind of approach a presidential election where you're basically only given two real choices, and there are those concerns or flaws in each regard? Because I have not been very quiet in my disdain for Donald Trump through the years, but the frustration of seeing the backlash from people who somehow still are very heavily pro-Trump to what Biden said and go about that kind of, well, what about this? And it's been challenging, I guess.
Yeah, it's like Biden sucks. Trump sucks. If I were to vote today, I'd vote for Biden because Trump is start a race war, to say the least. Like, another 4 years of Trump is detrimental for every American, white or Black or Asian or of any descent. Like, anyone who's in this country, it would be detrimental for us to have another 4 years of Donald Trump, because he does not think of anything but himself. Biden just at least maintain a sense of, like, we can't maintain a sense of anything, to be honest, in the society, but we need a president who at least isn't trying to divide our country by the seams. We need a president who at the very least, is not inciting violence like own citizens, who's not tear gassing his own people so he can hold the Bible upside down. At the very least, we don't need a dumbass as president, at the very least.
Yeah, the Bible photo op was special, particularly in the bigger context. And I think some of what we're talking about with the frustrations of the system and the fact that for all their flaws, you're pretty much limited to, are you voting for who the Republican Party has put forward or who the Democratic Party has put forward. And I think that's where a lot of the kind of the discontent with the fact that a vote can't be the only piece of changing and trying to find progress, and particularly voting in the presidential election is such a small piece, because well beyond what we're seeing with the presidential candidates. We need to really kind of focus a lot of attention on elections for legislators and at the federal and local levels. And on top of that, obviously a lot of issues with police reform and kind of union contracts and the way that the police are policed for these instances. So it's such a complex problem that's so deeply rooted that, as frustrating as the limited choices at the top of the line are, we have to make sure that we keep that same energy and that same determination that you mentioned across so many boards.
It's like we can't at this point. We're going to be hiring a racist bigot, an old racist bigot, regardless. But we can still control like who we are, what we believe in, what we do, what we preach, and what we teach. Like we just learn to educate each other, educate ourselves. Stop assuming that like every act is an act against you. Just like educate people, like understand people's perspectives. These people, I don't want to say the benefit of the doubt in every instance, because some people don't deserve it. But like to be so judgmental of people is damaging, because we all have our issues and our fault. We all have come short in a moment in one way or another. And to be too judgmental and like the way we judge others and how judgmental we are as a society has been very detrimental to us. That's why we look at others and be like, oh, they're big, they're more or less. You cannot look at someone else and judge their value. Like there's no way for you to look at a person and judge it. Like you can look at them and they can have as many tattoos as they want, wear whatever they like, and still go and be this and be a doctor and be a lawyer. And they don't have to be that to matter regardless. Like their value isn't their job and their work, what they do value. It's no one's decision to say this person's life isn't of value, which is why I don't agree with police reform. I will support police reform in the time being, but I believe in police and prison abolition and the setting of people and not just tossing them off and casting them aside, assuming that they have no value to society anymore. I believe in the abolition of the system in general. I believe we should try and fix it and do as much as we can to make it better now, but the system has to go. But the problem is too deeply rooted within the system for us to fix it completely.
The reaction in a lot of cases to what you're talking about in terms of the abolition of the system from the police standpoint through, judicial and prison system, people will ask, so what do you do then without those institutions in place? And I think people kind of forget that. We've had those institutions for so long that people forget that we did not have them at the outset of the country, and that was a later invention. But obviously, also the country is so much larger now than it was at that time. But what's kind of your thought or vision for what would be beyond that, I guess, if we got to that point, what's kind of the next step?
The only thing the entire carceral system has done for Americans is increase crime and increase our violence. More policing creates more crime and more violence. The more you police an area, the more people you're going to arrest. If police are targeting an area, looking for minor crimes to arrest people and doing things like stop and frisk was implemented, the number of arrests that made an area dangerous, these areas weren't dangerous because targeting, like the police were never needed, just like they aren't needed in schools. Like no one needs a cop in their school to stop a fight. It's high school kids, it's middle school kids. You don't need to put cuffs on a kid. Teach them how to handle his emotions. Teach them how to talk these things out. Stop treating them as criminals. If we stop treating people that do wrong as criminal for every time they do a wrong action, we wouldn't need a prison and carceral system to begin with. But we raised our people to love it. Like things will happen. I'm not gonna happen. Things will happen. There will be bad apples. Of course, that's like you can't completely stop all crime in a sense. But the more we enlarge and expand our criminal system, the more crimes are going to be perpetuated. Because in order to keep the system running, you need more and more people in the system. In order for them to fund their prisons, they're sending more and more Black people to jail. Like, we don't need prisons. We need to help these people. Why are you like this? What's wrong? You committing this crime? Why are you being written off as outcasts and being people of no value?
For people right now that are trying to find the best way to approach kind of our immediate circumstances and keep the ball rolling in some of the directions that, I guess, bigger picture that we're talking about, what would you, and we kind of referenced it in terms of just kind of keeping the determination, keeping some of the stamina, keeping some of the protesting going, but in terms of aspects that you would like to see, whether it be for, I mean, for people of any color really, but particularly from a group of white allies, as kind of the terminology has taken, what would be your advice or your hope that you'd see from people as we continue to try to address the issues at hand?
I mean, like we said, just continued support. As far as white allies go, as a specific group, is to focus on many people already understand racism and how it affects us. We already know that. We don't need you posting and coming protests in communities that already know that. We don't need you spreading the word to people that already know these things. We need you to change the mind of your parents, of your coworkers, of your peers, the people in your neighborhoods, because y'all, in the end of at the current state of society right now, those people impact. And unfortunately, more white people hold positions of office and of power than black people do. So it's up to people who are black, who are white, of any descent, to change the minds of people in power and to change the minds of people who are like near them and around them. Because you cannot ignore the numbers forever. Because if you ignore the numbers, you either get booted out. Like, you either ignore the numbers and get booted out, or you listen and you change. Like, you can't ignore the people forever. So if we continuously like pound them and stay on their necks and never let them let up. We can't let up. There can't be a moment of, oh, we're done. Like, it's been a while. Like 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, 6 months, a year, 2 years. It has to continuously be, we want better. We want equality. It doesn't stop because it's better. It's equality. It's not like, oh, it's getting better so we can chill now. No, it doesn't stop until we're equal, and it's staying that way. And that has to be the mindset. The mindset has to be that anyone who doesn't see everyone as equal doesn't deserve to be in your life, whether that's family, friends, jobs. Like, if it's someone that doesn't align with your values, if you would rather black men and women continuously be disadvantaged than be uncomfortable, then I don't want you in my life, and I don't you don't need your support. The support you make, I don't care if it's uncomfortable for any white, like, not to be rude, but I don't care if it's uncomfortable for any white ally. I don't care how uncomfortable it is for you. I care how much it bothers you, because it bothers me more. I've dealt with it longer. I've lived it longer. You'll be fine. Like, you'll be okay. Like, you people like you'll be okay.
And I was kind of laughing because I posted something the other day that tried to specifically appeal to like coaches and educators out there who consistently talk to their athletes, students, whoever, about the fact that you don't grow until you're out of your comfort zone and find yourself uncomfortable and find your way to grow through that. And so now I don't want to see anyone who has ever said that or ever intends to say that to anyone that they're trying to lead in any way and turn around and say, I don't want to talk about race issues in this country. Like, that's uncomfortable. I'm too cozy in my privilege right now. Like, right. let's just step that aside. And so I think that's a really interesting piece. And I think your point of, we can't look at, oh, nothing's gone tragically wrong to the point where we saw a 10-minute video of someone being murdered in the street for 2 months, like, congratulations, and all of a sudden feel like we're good to go and everything's better. That the progress that we're looking for here is such I started saying progress is a process. And so it's just piece by piece, step by step, that not seeing what happened to any of the long list of names and lives lost should be the baseline, no-brainer piece to that. But it's such a bigger and never-ending process to keep working toward that good, I guess, in society.
And I honestly don't understand the issue. And like, for me, anyone who's being defensive about anything that we're asking for, is anyone sees the statement Black Lives Matter and automatically thinks, well, all lives do. Well, we're not arguing that. It's not the issue. Like, I hate that like so many people are trying to force and include them into this movement to feel a part of the movement. I like to feel like they have to like where were Black people when we were doing this and doing that? But we've been on the front lines for every single thing in the country forever. We've been on the front lines since Jamestown. We've been here, helping build against our will. We've been here since the beginning of this country. And like you said, you have to hold everyone accountable. Like you said, like no matter how uncomfortable, everyone has to be held accountable. Mother, your mother, I'm sorry.
I don't even think you know that like I have ongoing back and forth with my mom. You just said your mother as kind of a general term, but
anyone who judges these protesters and the way everyone knows, everyone should know we're protesting peacefully. And in instances where this is not happening, you cannot expect a caged animal. You cannot expect to poke. Anything that's been caged, anything that's been told is less than human, anything that's been beaten, infuriated, and constantly expected to come out with peace. You cannot feed violence into a being and expect them to come out peaceful. Like you're asking for the impossible sometimes. Like you're feeding us with violence, countering our peace with violence, and still expect us to be peaceful, still cause us the issue. Like our reaction is always overanalyzed. What we did is always the issue. Like I'm not going to condemn looters when people are out here getting killed by racist people every day. That's the issue. That's the issue. No, looting isn't the issue. The killers are the issue. The racism is the issue. The system is the issue. Not the response to the issue.
It's people, I guess, have detracted by using the rioting and looting, and it's so I don't know the right word other than interesting or contradictory or whatever to see people say, okay, well, peacefully protest and we'll respect that, when Colin Kaepernick caught the backlash that he did, and here we still are years later after, and here we still are seeing people critical of Colin Kaepernick in the way that he protested. And now we see bigger, more widespread protests, and some of them getting violent and some of them involving looting. And people say, you know, we were starting to support you, but we draw the line at property damage. Like as soon as you mess with our stuff, like that's a bit much, isn't it? And it's so crazy because it just kind of shows how the value system is set for a lot of people in this country. That is a big piece of what we're arguing about in the first place, is that so many systems and so much of society has devalued Black lives. And then you very clearly take enough issue with someone looting or burning a Target that you start to say, well, I can't get behind this message anymore if it's going to involve some stuff getting broken or taken. And it just kind of proves the initial point that it was trying to argue against. And it's also, I think it shows how complex and challenging the push is going to be as you see news come out that there are literally white supremacist groups posing as anti-fascist, infiltrating protests and starting a lot of this violence because they want to detract and distract from the bigger issues. And very quickly, a lot of folks around the country kind of fall hook, line, and sinker into that and start to fall back into the same issue that caused our situation in the first place.
The internet can be powerful and dangerous at the same time. Like it offers a lot of information, but it also offers a lot of information. People sometimes see a post and run with it. They take it for the truth. They see one tweet like, oh, this has to be it. Like, the lack of research and ignorance is coming from the people that believe in these things because you want to and they're comfortable for you. Like, we've always known it's not been what we've been protesting. It's always who's doing the protesting. No matter how we protest, it's not the right way. No matter anything we're doing in life, no matter how we do it, it's not the right way. If it's not the way that absolutely appeals to the white man's pockets and his sense of dominance, if it's not anything that appeals to that, then it's not the right way. But yet, you don't support a movement because there's property damage, but you support a president who's a rapist, who's a racist. So either you're saying you're a hypocrite or you also support this because he believes in the thing that you believe in. Like, you're either saying, yeah, I'm just like him, or you're a hypocrite. And either way, I have no respect for you. Like, I don't even entertain people that are saying things like, that people that are like, anybody who's like saying, well, why can't you peacefully protest? Why you should be doing it peacefully? These whitewash like MLK quotes, like all of that, like MLK wouldn't have did this. MLK was here for the revolution, but he was far from passive. He was nonviolent, but he was far from passive. And when people did protest, he reached out to understand their feelings and he worked with the rioters, not to help them riot, but to quell the issue, to see why they were rioting. What was the issue? Why are you upset? Oh, what's the issue? Like, Colin Kaepernick literally took a knee for something that's barely even televised. Like, why does it hurt you? You don't have to look his way. You're supposed to be looking at the flag anyway. You don't have to look his way. A patriot, American, like, it should not be bothering you when like people are speaking out against an injustice. There is no proper platform to speak out against an injustice. You speak out wherever, whenever, and however, because it's an injustice and it should not be allowed to stand. Like, I'm not going to like be uncomfortable for your comfort. That's not going to happen. Especially when my discomfort is threatening to my livelihood. Your discomfort is threatening to your mood. You don't want to wear a mask. You think oppression is wearing a mask. Like, those are the same type of people. The same people who didn't support him, that are trying to support the peaceful protest now, are the same ones who are ready to storm the Capitol building with their mask and their guns. Behind masks, like, I try to educate, but I'm not entertaining ignorance, because you don't have to be ignorant in this society anymore.
A protest should not be comfortable to the systems and like people perpetrating the systems that they're protesting in the first place.
Like, this is not for your comfort. You're not, like, I don't care. Like, once I said, I don't care how they feel.
Man, so I'm going to do exactly what I said I was trying to awkwardly avoid by talking about the Yale stuff and the sports stuff at the beginning. I didn't want to come back and say, all right, well, we've had some great talk about much more important issues, but also how's track. But we kind of led so much into, there was just so much of your experience and kind of broadening perspectives and that conversation that really led into a lot of this other stuff. So here we are. You set a school record this spring, and early in the season you had run a 6.79 60-meter, which was just 0.02 of a second off of the school record. And then you come back and decide you're just going to start running 6.75 every time out, apparently, because you ran it in the meet with Harvard and Princeton, and you ran it again in the Ivy League championships. From on a much more positive topic, what was that experience like early in the spring, and just kind of the meaning of being that close to that record and then ultimately coming back and getting it done, and honestly getting it done right before everything shut down with COVID? It's
actually even bigger than that. Like, the meaning behind, like, me winning that race and breaking that record is like a top 2 moment in my life so far, because I was going through so much thing. I was going through depression. after having to quit football and no longer be able to play football because of my migraines and a really bad concussion, like I lost my sense of value in a lot of things. Like I felt like I wasn't worth anything. I was doubting myself. Like I spent much of my first year and a half at Yale depressed and like struggling with mental health because I was in an environment that just did not feel accepting to me and that I just didn't understand. And then like I didn't feel like I was striving and I felt like I was suffering so bad and like I was struggling in that environment. So I finally made the decision to quit football because I felt like football was the thing that was bringing me down the most. The strain and grind of football 8 hours a day while I have a migraine and still trying to do schoolwork proved to just be too much. So when I made the decision, I still wanted to be an athlete. But like I just feel like the need to run. So I decided to transition into track and I quit the football team in late October. And I ran the 6.79 in early December. And like that moment, after that race, like I shed tears after that race because 6.79 was not only a tenth of a second faster than like my personal record. Like I went from my personal record was a 6.9 flat, and the first time I would put on spikes again to run officially, it's a 6.79. After I had been dealing with so many things, like that moment was like a validation moment, and like I felt so powerful again. Like I felt like I had control over myself finally in that moment after that. And then I just held on to that and pushed through that for the rest of the season. And like I ended up hurting my hamstring too. Like it was a lot of ups and downs that weren't like documented throughout the season that happened. Like I only ran in 4 or 5 meets because I couldn't get things right. Like I was still trying to get in shape, still trying to transition from football to track, and like to go out there and to be the first Black 60-meter champion that ever went to Yale, to be a Black man atop Yale's like leader books, the oldest track team in the country, to be a Black man at one of the oldest institutions in the country that usually accepted white men to be there, like they usually only accept white men to be at that institution and to make a name for myself at that institution, to actually be proud of myself at that institution was the best feeling I've had in like one of the best feelings I've had in my short life so far.
That's awesome, man. So,
thank you.
I guess what have you been up to on the track wise? If you've been able to kind of stay active, or if it's been more recovery from some of the nagging injuries and stuff like that during the past couple months, and then what's kind of your outlook moving forward and heading into the rest of your athletic career up there, knowing that you've kind of had that moment in the middle of a season that you were dealing with a lot of nagging things to begin with.
I'm heartbroken about that season because I was just like, when I ran, I was finally recovering from all those things, and I was finally starting to feel good again, and I was excited for the outdoor season that was coming. So I'm like very disappointed in the season that was this year, and there's a chance the season next year gets canceled as well. So like, there's some uncertainty, not regarding like my decision to pursue track, just in when I'll compete again. I'm training though, like I still train. I'm still working out. Like I'm still preparing to compete when I come back to school, even if that season is canceled. And I'm also preparing for bigger and better things much longer down the line. Because like this focus on track is the first time I've ever been able to like focus on track solely and not do football and track. And like it allows me to hone much smaller things and not focus on weight gain and like things that were like football specific. And it allowed me to be faster, stronger, and like my plan is a multi-year program that like leads me to like doing track professionally, hopefully internationally, and like taking it to the next level. But yes, we're training. We're definitely training.
Yeah, we were talking about earlier, just the little differences in track that can make such a big difference in what the time ends up being or where you place in a certain heat and all those things. So that's part of what's I was really excited about hearing the way your I guess your last meets of spring went before everything came to a screeching halt around the country, is that you reached that point, and I know that there were so many reasons to assume that progress is going to continue, and you're going to be able to build upon that here in the years to come, as you continue to kind of focus in on it. Also have a lot of the the depression aspects now behind you and have kind of figured some of that stuff out, and I think there's no reason to not expect even bigger things than that 6.75, all those things that you're looking for.
Definitely. Like, I found how much I love track. As much as I love football with everything in me, it was my favorite sport ever. The feelings I got from the adrenaline that you get from playing football, it's very, very, very hard to replicate. And then you do it for multiple plays, like you do it over and over again. And it's a thrilling sport. But like, after working so hard individually and working at something for once working at something for myself and like the betterment of myself, instead of having to do everything with someone else in mind. Like, my whole life it's been, I'm doing this for like the future of my community, for the future of my family, for like future, for my teammates. Like, for once I got on back, and like, it may be selfish to some people, but like, to finally be able to self-validate who I was, the things I was capable of, and the fact that like I wanted to do it, and it meant a lot to me. And like, there's no way that I'm ever going to let that feeling go anymore. Like, I'm never going to let like the feeling of like what I can do and what I'm capable of and the power that lies within myself. I'll never be able to forget that now because of the individuality that I was allowed to pursue in track.
I'm excited to see where it goes, man.
Yeah, thank you, man.
I mean,
thank you.
For all those reasons that we just talked about. Yeah, I certainly appreciate you taking probably more time than either one of us was initially planning on, and really kind of hashing through some critical things, as well as kind of sharing how some things have been going on your end in the school and sports world. I don't know. Always a pleasure.
Yeah.
Love you and appreciate you.
Love you too, man. Thank you for calling. I love having these conversations. These conversations are important. Thank you for what you're doing. Yeah, man. I hope we can catch up, talk up some more soon.
Yeah, I feel like there's, just everything that we talked through in the big picture thing, as well as the piece of not only your sports side, but just kind of the mental, no pun intended, as a track athlete, but the mental hurdles that you had to go through and kind of dealing with the first couple of years of college and get to where you are, and kind of that self-validation and that freedom in what you're doing, I think is all very interesting for young athletes of any background or race or anything, because I think that's a piece of the sports side that a lot of times doesn't get nearly the attention and understanding that it deserves. So I feel like we could have a lot of these conversations, honestly.
Yeah. There's plenty to talk about. There's always new things to learn. I think people should understand that. Like, you never know. I would be willing to accept new ideas, new possibilities, talk with people, and you never know what you'll learn, who you'll meet, what you'll find. Yeah.
He's Trenton Charles, former Scotlandville star, up at Yale now, the fastest 60-meter time any Yale athlete has ever run in the history of ever. And for Louisiana versus all y'all, Jared Roser.